I am so excited about this. To my right is George Saunders. George Saunders, in my opinion, George, can you just shut your ears real quick?
No, it's all right. Go ahead.
That's okay? Okay, great. In my opinion, one of the greatest living novelists. I mean, writers. This is your first novel.
It is.
I was introduced to your work by my wife, actually. She gave me a copy of The 10th of December, which I subsequently just drooled all over. I think that is such an incredible piece of work.
Just what I had in mind.
But tell us a little bit about what's happening here. We're going to do a reading.
So we're going to do a reading from my novel, Lincoln in the Bardo, and that book is based on this story I heard years ago. And the story was that when Lincoln was president, his beloved son, Willie, passed away. And newspapers at the time reported that Lincoln was so grief-stricken that he'd actually gone into the crypt on several occasions to somehow interact with the body. So the book just takes place on that night when Lincoln entered into the crypt.
Oh my goodness! And it's narrated in a fairly strange way.
It is, because you first have that great idea. I'll write a book about Lincoln alone in a graveyard at night, and then you're kind of like, well, who's narrating this thing? So your first thought is Lincoln, and then you find yourself typing, 407 minutes ago I did enter yon graveyard, and that's no good. And then I thought, well, who else is in a graveyard alone at night? And I thought, gravedigger. Then I'd like, a gravedigger? He's like practicing or something, or he's like, look at that, a perfect rectangle, one of my best, So finally, I literally just thought, well, who's in a graveyard at night? And I thought, well, ghosts. So the book is narrated by this kind of Greek chorus of these unhappy spirits who are stuck in this zone called the Bardo.
And what is the Bardo?
Well, Bardo is a Tibetan word that means just transitional state. So we're in a Bardo right now between birth and death. And there's another one of the book that goes from the minute you die to, whatever happens next.
Gotcha, like purgatory.
It is, but I was raised Catholic, and to me, purgatory is like the DMV, like you die and then you go sit on a hard bench until the end of days, but... But this, at least my interpretation of Bardo, is a little more negotiable. So if you're in there and you have a revelation about your life, or sometimes even if you just admit the fact that you're dead, then it's possible to pass on to the next zone. So in the section we're going to read, Lincoln has just been to the crypt and kind of shocking himself. He's held his son's body, kind of feels a little strange about it, goes to leave the graveyard, but his grief is so heavy that he actually can't quite get out. So country boy that he was, he sits down in some long grass and he's just kind of thinking. And then two ghosts that just witnessed this event in the crypt show up and try to kind of lure him back to the crypt for a more gentle goodbye. So one of the conventions of this world is that if a ghost co-occupies the same space as a living being, that ghost actually has access to that living being's thought stream, so it can read the person's mind. So if there was a ghost in the Fitzgerald and it occupied the space where you're sitting, sir, for example, it would read your mind. So just be careful. So we're just going to read a little section.
Feeling okay, sir? All right? Okay.
Read a little section from that part of the book.
All right, settle in, y'all. Here's a reading from Lincoln in the Bardo.
We found a gentleman, as had been described to us, near Bellingweather, husband-father shipwright.
Sitting cross-legged and defeated in a patch of tall grass.
As we approached, he lifted head from hands and heaved a great sigh. He might have been, in that moment, a sculpture on the theme of loss.
Shall we? Mr. Volman said. I hesitated. The Reverend would not approve, I said. The Reverend is not here, he said.
In order to occupy the greatest percentage of the gentleman's volume, I lowered myself into his lap and sat cross-legged, just as he was sitting.
The two now comprised one sitting man, Mr. Volman's greater girth somewhat overflowing the gentleman.
It was quite something in there. "Bevins, come in," I called out. "This is not to be missed."
And I went in, assuming the same cross-legged posture.
And the three of us were one.
So to speak.
There was a touch of prairie about the fellow,
Yes.
like stepping into a summer barn late at night.
Or a musty plains office where some bright candle still burns.
Vast, windswept, new, sad.
Spacious, curious, doom-minded, ambitious.
Back, slightly out.
Right boot chafing.
The recent entry of the youthful Mr. Bevins now caused the gentleman a mild thought swerve, back to a scene from his own wild youth. A soft-spoken but retrograde lass, dirty cheeks, kind eyes, leading him shyly down a muddy path. Nettles accruing on her swaying green skirt as, in his mind, at the time, a touch of shame rose up, having to do with his sense that this girl was not really fair game, i.e., was more beast than lady, i.e., did not even know how to read.
Becoming aware of that which he was remembering, the man's face reddened. We could feel it reddening at the thought that he was, in the midst of this tragic circumstance, remembering such a sordid incident.
And he hurriedly directed our mind elsewhere, so as to leave this inappropriate thought behind.
Tried to see his boy's face.
Couldn't.
Tried to hear the boy's laugh.
Couldn't.
Attempted to recall some particular incident involving the boy in hope this might...
First time we fitted him for a suit.
Thus thought the gentleman. This did the trick.
First time we fitted him for a suit, he looked down at the trousers and then up at me, amazed, as if to say, "Father, I'm wearing grown-up pants." Shirtless, barefoot, pale round belly like an old man's, then the little cuffed shirt and buttoning it up. "Goodbye, little belly, we are inshirting you now." Inshirting, I do not believe that is even a word, Father. I tied the little tie, spun him around for a look. "We have dressed up a wild savage, looks like," I said. He made the growling face. His hair stuck straight up, his cheeks were red. Racing around that store just previous, he'd knocked over a rack of socks. The tailor, complicit, brought out the little jacket with much pomp. Then the shy, boyish smile as I slid the jacket on him. "Say," he said, "don't I look fine, Father?"
Then no thought at all for a while. And we just looked about us. Bare trees, black against the dark blue sky.
Little jacket, little jacket, little jacket.
This phrase sounded in our head. The star flickered off, then on.
Same one he's wearing back in there now. Huh. Same little jacket, but he who is wearing it is... I so want it not to be true. Broken, pale broken thing. Why will it not work? What magic word made it work? Who is the keeper of that word? What did it profit him to switch this one off? What a contraption it is. How did it ever run? What spark ran it? Grand little machine, set up just so. Receiving the spark, it jumped to life. What put out that spark? What a sin it would be. Who would dare ruin such a marvel? Hence is murder anathema. God forbid I should ever commit such a grievous...
Something then troubling us.
We ran one hand roughly over our face, as if attempting to suppress a notion just arising.
This effort not proving successful.
The notion washed over us.
Young Willie Lincoln was laid to rest on the day that the casualty lists from the Union victory at Fort Donelson were publicly posted, an event that caused a great shock among the public, the cost in life being unprecedented thus far in the war.
From Setting the Record Straight, Memoir and Evasion by Jason Toome.
More than 1,000 troops on both sides were killed, and 3 times that number wounded. It was a most bloody fight, a young Union soldier told his father, so devastating to his company that despite the victory, he remained sad, lonely, and downhearted. only 7 of the 85 men in his unit survived.
From Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin.
The dead lay as they had fallen, in every conceivable shape, some grasping their guns as though in the act of firing, while others, with a cartridge in their icy grasp, were in the act of loading. Some of the countenances wore a peaceful, glad smile, while on others rested a fiendish look of hate. It looked as though each countenance was the exact counterpart of the thoughts that were passing through the mind when the death messenger laid them low.
From the Civil War Years, account of Corporal Lucius W. Barber.
And Mother, fire had swept through the frozen dead and hurt where they lay. We found one still kicking among them, and was able to bring him back still alive, not even knowing which side he was on, so burned was he, and naked, except for one leg of his pants. I never did hear how he made out, but it did not look hopeful for that poor devil.
From Letters of an Illinois Soldier, account of Private Edward Gates.
We found 2 little fellas holding hands, couldn't been more than 14, 15 apiece, as if they had decided to pass through that dark portal together.
From unpublished Civil War correspondence of Andrew Stark, by permission of his family.
How many more dead do you intend to make, sir, afore you's done? One minute there was our little Nate on that bridge with the fish pole, and where is that boy now? And who is it called him hither? In that notice he saw down to Orbeez, well, sir, that was your name he saw upon it, Abraham Lincoln.
From Country Letters to President Lincoln, letter from Robert Hansworthy, Boonesboro, Maryland.
All those boys. He is just one, and the weight of it about to kill me. Have exported this grief some 3,000 times so far, to date. A mountain of boys, someone's boys. Must keep on with it, but may not have the heart for it. It's one thing to pull the lever when blind to the result, but here lies one dear example of what I accomplished by the orders. I may not have the heart for it. What am I doing? What am I doing here? Everything nonsense now. Those mourners came up, hands extended, sons intact, wearing on their faces enforced sadness masks to hide any sign of their happiness, which went on. They could not hide how alive they yet were with it, with their happiness at the potential of their still living sons. Until lately, I was one of them, strolling, whistling through the slaughterhouse, able to laugh and dream and hope because it had not yet happened to me, to us. Horrible trap. At one's birth it is sprung. Some last day must arrive when you will need to get out of this body. Bad enough. Then we bring a baby here. The terms of the trap are compounded. That baby also must depart. All pleasures should be tainted by that knowledge, but hopeful, dear us, we forget. Lord, what is this? All of this walking about, trying, smiling, bowing, joking, this sitting down at table, pressing of shirts, tying of ties, shining of shoes, planning of trips, singing of songs in the bath, when he is to be left out here? Is a person to nod, dance, reason, walk, discuss as before? A parade passes. He can't rise and join. Am I to run after it? Take my place, lift knees high, wave a flag, blow a horn? Was he dear or not? Then let me be happy no more.
It was quite cold. Being in the Gentleman, we were, for the first time in
Ever so long.
quite cold ourselves.
He sat, distraught and shivering, seeking about for any consolation.
He must either be in a happy place or some null place by now.
thought the gentleman.
In either case is no longer suffering. Suffered so terribly at the end.
And in his mind, the gentleman stood, we stood with him, on a lonely plain, screaming at the top of our lungs. Quiet then, and a great weariness.
All over now. He's either in joy or nothingness. So why grieve? The worst of it for him is over. Because I loved him. And I'm in the habit of loving him, and that love must take the form of fussing and worry and doing, only there's nothing left to do. Free myself of this darkness as I can, remain useful, not go mad. Think of him when I do as being in some bright place, free of suffering, resplendent in a new mode of being.
Thus thought the gentleman, thoughtfully combing a patch of grass with his hand.
And Lord, the fellow was low. He was attempting to formulate a goodbye in some sort of positive spirit, not wishing to enact that final departure in gloom, in case it might be felt somehow by the lad, even as he told himself that the lad was now past all feeling. So he lingered, hoping for some comforting notion to arise, upon which he might expand. But nothing came. Low, colder than before, and sadder. And when he directed his mind outward, seeking the comfort of his life out there, and the encouragement of his future prospects, and the high regard in which he was held, no comfort was forthcoming, but on the contrary. He was not, it seemed, well thought of, or succeeding in much of anything at all.